Are most of us developers lying about how much work we do? I have been working as a software developer for almost 2 decades. I have received multiple promotions. I make decent money, 3x, 4x my area's median salary, so I live a comfortable life. I have never been fired or unemployed for more than a few months total over my entire career. Through most of that time I have averaged roughly 5 to 10 hours of actual work a week. I'm not even discounting job-related but non-coding time as not work. There are literally days in which the only time I spend on my job is the few minutes it takes to attend the morning stand-up. Then I successfully bullshit my way through our next stand-up to hide my lack of production. No one has ever called me out on this and my performance reviews range from mediocre to great. I'm generally a smart person. I went to a top 30 university, but it's not like I'm a genius or I'm coasting off connections made while getting a Harvard education. I wouldn't consider myself an abnormally talented developer. I often don't understand the technical details other engineers discuss in meetings. I have probably bombed more tech interviews than I have passed. All my jobs have been between 2 to 5 years, so I'm neither finding a place to stagnate or leaving before anyone could judge my production. It feels like I am in the middle of the bell curve in terms of career success. So what gives? Are most of us secretly lying about how much we are working? Do people regularly run into coworkers like me during their career and simply ignore it because they find it too awkward to criticize them? Have I just been incredibly lucky and every boss I have had is too incompetent to notice? Do I have imposter syndrome and I am actually a 10x developer whose laziness makes them a 1x developer? These questions have kept popping up in my mind over the last year. Remote work during the pandemic has allowed me to finally be honest with myself and stop pretending I am working when I am not. I want to know if I was the only one pretending. Greater than do people regularly run into coworkers like me during their career and simply ignore it because they find it too awkward to criticize them? Have I just been incredibly lucky and every boss I have had is too incompetent to notice? Do I have imposter syndrome and I am actually a 10x developer whose laziness makes them a 1x developer? Lazy developers don't really bother me. If you do a couple hours of high-quality work a week I'd have no complaint. Many weeks I do as little, some weeks I do a decent amount of real work. The problem is developers making negative progress, usually messes that need to be cleaned up, and it's an awkward situation, no matter your relative authority. I'm in the we should consider them lines spent, not lines produced camp. An old disputed quote. Greater than I divide my officers into 4 classes as follows: the clever, the industrious, the lazy, and the stupid. Each officer always possesses 2 of these qualities. Greater than those who are clever and industrious I appoint to the general staff. Use can under certain circumstances be made of those who are stupid and lazy. The man who is clever and lazy qualifies for the highest leadership posts. He has the requisite nerves and the mental clarity for difficult decisions. But whoever is stupid and industrious must be got rid of, for he is too dangerous. Yes. I bucket people into paddling the right direction, sitting in the boat, and paddling the wrong way. With enough momentum, you can tolerate the people that are sitting in the boat. Sometimes they have good reasons and it's temporary. The people always actively working against progress need to be overboard. Smaller teams may need all paddlers. I'd like to think I'm always paddling and usually the right direction. I've worked with a genuine 0.1x developer. Not only were they unproductive, which is fine if you are new or inexperienced in an area, but they actually reduced the productivity of others in the team. I think sometimes this was deliberate as a plan to get the team reassigned. Luckily I was a contractor and could largely ignore the politics and just get on with work. Stupid and industrious is exactly the crypto/NFT population. They are smart in code, but zeros in financial literacy, and zeros in complex social dynamics, the perfect rubes to promote hazy, social frauds. Always found that quote interesting as is not really correct. Everyone is a percentage of those traits. No one is universally clever and never does anything stupid, for example. It's putting people in a box, which people love to do. Massively agree with this, either do nothing or do it right. I'm a contractor and change around a fair bit, and when I join a project you can tell if it is good or okay or terrible. My current project is terrible. The people who set it up tried but have that real lack of understanding what is required. They have clean code but no tests. It is really hard to debug and takes forever to deliver anything. If they had just done nothing, I could have set it up properly when I started and we could have been done months ago. 4 choose 2 is 6. The quote only specified what to do with 4 of those combinations. What does one do with the other 2? Or is it just impossible to be both clever and stupid at the same time? I've had my share of both cleverly stupid ideas and stupidly clever ideas. Greater than lazy developers don't really bother me. If you do a couple hours of high quality work a week I'd have no complaint. This has been my philosophy. As long as a developer is not making me do more work, I won't mind. I think there's also something to be said for passive processing. Sometimes I'll know I need to write some code or some function and I'll just think about it in the back of my head while doing other things, sometimes for a whole day or two. Then I'll sit down and write it in like 20 to 30 minutes. Did I work 20 to 30 minutes, or have I been working for a day or two? I would say a day or two, and the 20 to 30 minutes was the time needed to produce the deliverable of that work. Greater than did I work 20 to 30 minutes, or have I been working for a day or two? I would say a day or two, and the 20 to 30 minutes was the time needed to produce the deliverable of that work. I would say that I do this too. There's a lot of stuff I can more or less do on autopilot and stuff that requires actual attention and finesse, for lack of a better word. I feel like management thinks that I'm good at my job for all the autopilot stuff that I can crank out, and that makes up for the time I spend implementing one of the more interesting bits. I think one of the ways that remote work changes this is that I can do other things while I think through a tricky problem. I can do dishes or walk my dog or something instead of trying to look busy in a room with 6 to 12 other people who are furiously typing, because that's how the manager and project manager understand that work gets done. He never spent a long time on a problem since he believed that the subconscious would continue working on the problem while he consciously worked on another problem. This is definitely a thing. Intellectual labor just isn't physical labor. Adding my voice to this one. I think a lot of work normal people, i.e. the PMs, the non-technical management, the salespeople etc. really don't get how we techies work. Because they have to do active work all day long to keep on top. They think everyone is like that, where in reality we are really efficient in short bursts. I can ponder a deliverable for days and then just churn it out over a few hours, only taking breaks for coffee intake/discharge. The normals keep asking me how far have you got with X during the whole period, and they don't seem like it when I say I'm thinking about it, but I've not done anything yet. This. I will backburner a ticket for days, then when what I need to do comes together I will sit down and bang it out in an hour. It's to the point that I will deliberately review a ticket and code segment every day, even if I'm not actively working it, just to have the pieces come together in my mind and crank out the ticket. This method is not very Scrum friendly, because in truth I'm actually brain working all of my tickets at the same time, but I haven't shifted any electrons, just neurons. Sometimes, when I hit a sticking point, I go do something completely different, like read Hacker News, in order to push stuff into what I call background processing in my subconscious. I almost got fired once for explaining this to my boss. He felt very strongly that each day of a 10-day project should mark 10% in progress. I told him that instead, you think about it, explore a few ideas, then suddenly you might be at 80%. But it's not linear. For sure, We need to collectively recognize how much real work takes place in this mode. I once collaborated with a colleague to design and implement a data sync framework. For 6 weeks we chatted about it during our lunch break, while walking from the office to a Japanese takeaway and back again. We'd propose ideas and find weaknesses and flaws in them, and would spend our evenings thinking hard to come up with solutions to get around these issues. Our boss saw none of this, but it easily consumed about 3 weeks of person hours, i.e. around 120 hours. One day, walking back from lunch, neither of us could find any problems with our proposed solution. We walked into the office straight into a meeting room, spent 30 minutes drawing diagrams on a whiteboard, then returned to our desks and coded up a working proof of concept in a couple of hours. From our boss's perspective, we had implemented a new technology in an afternoon. He's the kind of non-technical person who equates productivity with typing code into a computer. But I think more places need to equate productivity with sitting on a sofa staring into space, or going for long walks, or whatever it happens to be that works for the developer in question. I agree. I used to think I was like Op, coasting in between being quite productive. One day I took a bath, ended up thinking about my ticket, got out of the bath and did the ticket in an hour. The thinking time was definitely work, just not in the traditional sense. And yes, I could have done the ticket without the bath, it may even have taken the same time, but the code wouldn't have been as clean and there would have been a few more commits. Processing for 1 or 2 days to prepare productive working that takes 30 minutes, sounds a bit extreme. But I get the gist and second it. I hate developers who immediately jump at any task coding right away. They usually actually get the stuff done, but the solution is ugly and contrived instead of elegant and simple. That's also what makes me skeptical of devs obsessing about typing, layouts, keyboards, editors, to optimize it further. As a developer, I never found speed of input to be even close to a bottleneck. The bottleneck usually lack of silence and peace in a large office, which I need to think. To be fair, I've done both. By now I can roughly estimate that a task will take me 1 hour. If I dedicate myself to it right now, it will actually take me 2 to 3 hours. I can also sort of carry it around for a couple of days, and then implement it in 1 hour. This says 2 things about me. I usually underestimate the design details when estimating time, and the design takes me roughly the same time anyway. This kind of background processing was covered in detail in the infamous Learning How to Learn MOOC. I would go further, suggesting that for people unaware of this way of thought processing / problem solving, like Op, peer pressure may bring something akin to imposter syndrome. This doesn't have to be a programmer-only thing, imho. If you spend 5 hours chilling and 3 executing and everybody is happy with your performance, it may be just your way to do things. If someone next to you does the same by coding 8 hours straight, it's their style, and neither is better. Right? I find that I have to sleep on most hard problems. WFH is great because I can take a nap and then get back to work. In the office I can't do that. Less hard problems need less passive processing but are better solved on a bicycle or doing something completely unrelated. I think passive processing is one, intuition is the other. You can solve a problem by thinking about it for hours or by once looking at it, and immediately knowing a good solution. It's about experience, intelligence and probably many other factors. And that doesn't mean you'll perform well in technical interviews. They're often about specific algorithms most people would never implement themselves. Few are about the problem-solving part of programming. I can attest to this. There have been times I spent 20 to 30 minutes understanding a new problem at 5 p.m., which at the time seemed like it was going to take up a significant amount of my working hours the next day. Then come back the next day and I'm able to finish the task before 10 a.m. During the evening, the problem was solved both consciously, thinking about it on the train home, and subconsciously, whilst sleeping. I just had to produce the deliverable the next day. This This happens whether I enjoy the thing I am working on or not. It's just part of the process. Also, sometimes your mind needs a break. I personally cannot produce quality thoughts continuously no matter how much you force me, or I want to. I can mindlessly do physical things, but cannot code or think. I find it hard to believe there are people who can do this. If there are, they must be rare, I believe. It is shocking beyond words to me what accepted dogma it is that the human resources / devs only work on one thing at a time. They start at the beginning, plan, write, test, and code review the thing, and then move on. It's a huge waste of human potential. Background processing is vital. Getting hit by the various silly hurdles in the path to shipping, having to go from the elation of getting something done to having to switch to an entirely different set of less fun tasks to get it shipping. Yet our processes, our industrial processes, are oriented towards a surety, towards treating us human resources like machines, to making us complete full units of work. It's hard for me to tell exactly where this sprung up from, how it is so deeply rooted. I tell my managers outright I think it's a wasteful, and outright damaging practice, but that I understand that it's the expectation, that every other company acts like fools too, not just them. I don't argue, but I am quite clear that you will get much less out of me when I don't have some autonomy, when I have to drag, roll, push, row, swim each rock, one at a time, from end to end. Again, I'm not sure how such a demeaning and menial form of completing single task at a time happens, especially when no one in management or upper ranks is expected to live like this. My top theory is just that it's convenient for management purposes. That companies are bad at assessing progress, that we're afraid of situations that aren't ultra well scheduled and predictable, and that we treat programmers like cogs in a machine because we're too afraid to try for better. Creative procrastination is amazing. Not only are programmers out doing great things, but the task they're more obligated to do goes from irrelevant and stupid to something they just don't ever want to think of again. The internal pressures builds over time, even for the irrelevant everyday crap of development, until we're finally jazzed to just get it done. By procrastinating, we bank up some motivation. And we've gotten a lot of passive processing in. Productive procrastination is one well-known example, but I feel like it's just the tip of the iceberg. Having some different tasks to switch between, having a wheelhouse of obligations, allows enormous relief, allows a much higher average output to be maintained, in my view. I'm kind of in a lull of personal projects right now, because I completed some stuff, and don't have a lot of in-flight options to pick up and work between. Everything feels so slow, and getting going again has been such a chore. I feel it so much. Being able to trade off, switch around, chase what feels good is a huge productivity increase. More than anything, what amazes me is how conventional and dogmatic companies are. They seemingly all chase the same malgening evil controlling exploitation of human resources, and not a once has a company seemed to even understand that there are trade-offs. The whole industry is exactly the same, controlling and top-down, one at a time. The people who invented Amdahl's law, surprisingly, seem utterly unable to grasp its application to humans and our motivations. We all have diverse and wide execution units, but we are treated like in-order single-stage processors. If this were just the predominant way of treating engineers/human resources, I'd find it unfortunate, but that it is almost entirely the rule, that it is universally expected, that there are so few systems or experiments for doing anything else, the status quo is pathetic and cruel, and lacks even the basic legitimacy to have explored other ideas. While this is true, I strongly doubt OP is talking about this case. In your example, although it did look like you didn't work from the outside, but in your mind you were still thinking about the problem, technically speaking, working. The case in discussion is how we developers do just the bare minimum consciously, or unconsciously, and the fake away the rest. Even with this perspective, I don't consider it wrong at all. Our developer brains can be in the zone for not more than 2 to 5 hours every day. If we force ourselves to be in the zone more than that, we are just damaging our runway and heading towards a burnout. That said, the only thing we could do is learn how to increase our zone hours. John Carmack went to the extent of measuring his bathroom breaks as a way to extend these focus zones. While that is a bit extreme, generally as developers our antidote should be to optimize our focus zones to what fits us. Intellectual and physical work differs a lot. True. Writing a book may take years, while writing the words mere days. This, however, should not be an excuse, but a cue to get better at that thinking stuff. Improve it. Train it. Learn. And with all that, strongly ask yourself if that backburner time must be paid. A bricklayer needs 10+ hours off to rest his body, so he can lay bricks for another 8 hours tomorrow. Should we pay him 18 hours? My answer to both is that when I efficiently ponder and backburn ideas, it is work. But when I'm binging Silicon Valley episode 5, it is not, unless I can prove that this helps me bring the problem closer. Very common. It's hard to quantify the mental work done, so we only measure kilos of code written. I do think though that anyone that has written code should be able to understand that it's not as simple as sitting down and typing fast. Yeah, I am kind of similar boat. I actually has opportunity to implement certain algorithms which were pivotal in launch of specific products. I spent perhaps 3 to 4 hours implementing the whole thing, but I kept thinking about the core problem for a week, so much so that I started dreaming about it. This dream thing happened quite often. I have never done what you describe, except perhaps in times of illness when it was understood that working less was a reasonable accommodation. In that particular case, I had leftover brain fog from general anesthesia. I've never heard of any colleagues doing it either. I would never snitch if it happened, but I would certainly consider that person untrustworthy or think that they have an undisclosed condition that is between them and HR. As you covered in your post, we don't write code 8 hours a day. This is normal. Meetings, context switch and times when focus is unachievable are expected and mostly understood by my experienced management. So are times when we are monitoring technology advancement and keeping an eye on the industry and community, for example lurking at HN but not overly posting and commenting, and times of social activity between workers, for example talking about the weekend. Most of us take mental health breaks between meetings and need to take time to think through issues. Many also need to periodically break focus to think about personal life issues or hobbies. As long as you generally strive to work, this is not a problem either. But walking into a stand-up and then lying about your day, to me, that's unethical. The real question to me is, do you do that on purpose, or is this something that happens even if you are trying to focus? There are many conditions, from stress and anxiety to diagnosed mental health issues, that can prevent you from focusing. Burnouts and bore-outs also come to mind. In my eyes, the fact that you asked the community about it shows that you have some form of concern towards that behavior. Would you say it is negatively impacting your life? I'm happy to finally read a comment that say this isn't a good or normal thing. I was starting to feel a bit of despair. I don't think I've done that much more that you seems to do, but I've certainly seen a lot of people do it and it's always been pissing me off. I've always wondered how the world even works when I consider how much I've seen people do that at every level and at every kind of job. Dear original post author, you really need to start doing something that you enjoy or that motivates you. You can also try to structure your life in a way that allows you to not work when you don't feel like you can or will be efficient. This is one of the very reason I'm freelancing. I work when I want/can, and do not pretend the rest of the time. But when I'm working, I'm trying to stay as close as possible to 100%. I charge a premium rate for those very focused session, and do not pretend the rest of the time. There are times when I work a lot, times when I don't accept new projects because I need time off, usually 4 months a year. I'm really wondering how healthy is, psychologically, all this pretending. Anyway, I don't think you're alone in your situation, but I don't think it's a good thing either. Most of the other answers focus on how programming is not typing, which I agree with, of course, but I think they miss the point. Yours answers directly and I agree with it. Working 5 to 10 hours a week seems very low to me, though as a lead or as a co-worker I would judge op by the impact, not by the time spent behind the computer. But I doubt anyone can have serious impact in such time. I had the chance to work with a brilliant co-worker who preferred to slack off, and have passed on recommending him for this very reason. World is a big place and there are many ways to go through life, so I'm not judging, but if you're asking if this is common, then the answer is no, not at the places where I worked, and not how I work. Of course you would have to pay/promise me fortune to get more than 40 hours weeks from me, but I'm not hiding that. Smile? All the other comments about the background processing, waiting for inspiration, only having stamina for a certain amount of time are all correct. For 40 years I have lived that life and have never been in a situation where I averaged more than a few hours a day of actual coding. It often takes a long time for me to figure out what to do, but that's work, but 5 to 10 a week. Get a different job that you like. I have worked in situations where there wasn't really enough to do. My response: write something else. If I was 100% retired I would work more than 5 or 10 hours a week. And I think, Karaweb Network, that you are right to inquire about mental health. Having that little energy and motivation is not a good thing. I agree. I once had a coworker who I knew was underperforming. They went from normal output to just checking in and out. It was pretty frustrating, and demoralizing as it felt like they weren't pulling their weight. Among teams there is a social contract, it's not all just between an employee and the company, it also impacts your coworkers. Not sure about the arguments regarding ethics. When I'm an employee, my contract is with the employer. They pay me, they evaluate me, and their success is what determines my progress, in a good company. Sure, co-workers can suffer if I refuse to do my work, but I'm not there to make them happy, I'm there to make the company money. So I don't think it's unethical to work less as long as your employer is still happy with what you do. Sure, lying is always suboptimal. But if your company likes your output and would just be confused by the hours needed to achieve, I don't see a big problem with it. You could even argue that working full-time and producing 8x as much could bring co-workers in trouble who already can barely match ops output. And they will exist. He wouldn't have gotten to the point where he is if he constantly was the worst performer. Software development isn't a matter of sitting down and generating a fixed amount of code per hour. The rate of writing code is hugely variable. It's not unusual for most of my productive, as in typing actual code, time to be concentrated in a few particular days in a month. The time not spent typing, or being in meetings, doing admin, etc., isn't actually unproductive though. It's mostly spent solving problems, and a lot of that effort happens below the level of consciousness. A lot of it actually happens during sleep. It's effort, though, and it costs. You can't do an infinite amount of it in infinitesimal time. I suggest 2 tests to see if you're lazy or dumb. 1. Try to be more productive by sheer effort of will. Just say to yourself, this month I will write more code than usual, and set to it with a positive attitude. If you succeed, you were being lazy, and now you know how to not be lazy. If, as is more likely from what you've said, you fail, then you're not lazy. You're working at your maximum capacity, but you have a poor understanding of what constitutes work in the job you do. 2. If, by the above test, you are not lazy, then look at how well you do relative to your peers. If you're holding your own, as you say you are, you're not dumb either. Greater than software development isn't a matter of sitting down and generating a fixed amount of code per hour. The rate of writing code is hugely variable. The time not spent typing, or being in meetings, doing admin, etc., isn't actually unproductive though. All true statements, but that's not what we're talking about. Op recognizes that he works 5 to 10 hours a week, and effectively blows the rest of the day off. Reminds me a bit of an engineer who reported to me a few years ago. He would describe every week in our 1:1s and during team meetings how he was solving this tough thread synchronization problem. Because we trusted each other, we trusted that the problem was difficult. Then when he finally submitted his code, it was a single line. A single trivial line, as in, read the Python multiprocessing docs for 5 minutes and the solution is right there. Okay. Sometimes it can take a long time to find that one-line fix, I get it. But then I looked into his commit history, and it turns out he was averaging a few lines of code a week, on a good week, and sometimes even 0. When I confronted him, he said, "You can't measure my productivity by lines of code." Okay, sure, but how far am I supposed to excuse an engineer who has committed 100 lines of code in 10 months? What a statistical oddity, that every single task he took on turned out to be a single line fix dragon. I think this 2-question test is very accurate. To add to this, even if for a time, you can increase your productivity, sometimes that's not sustainable. There's nothing wrong with having ebbs and flows. On days when you have a larger workload of smaller tasks, you may find yourself to be incredibly productive, and days when you have smaller workloads, or larger tasks, and you may be less productive. The thing is, if your boss is happy with your pace and work, then why be worried? It is literally your boss's job to notice if you aren't pulling your weight, and to ensure you are compensated fairly for your work. The workplace hierarchy, hopefully, and usually, is set up so you don't have to govern whether you are working at the proper pace. That is the problem of your superiors. It's only up to you to accomplish the tasks you are given, or give advice about those tasks if they are wrong. I see myself very much like the person in the original question. For me, I try to put in sheer effort on a regular basis. It is just that more day than not, I just can't bring myself to do it. I end up spending more time berating myself for not working, slacking off, writing this answer on HN, etc., than actually working. The sad, or perhaps enlightening, thing is that it has always been like this. Since school, I would always do work at the last possible second. The only save is that I actually do a good job at the end, so it goes unnoticed. But the process is excruciating, and looking back at week after week of something like 5 to 10 hours per week is frustrating. Like the original question, I also lie in stand-ups. I get why people say it is unethical, but I can't bring myself to saying I wasted the whole day yesterday on Reddit. For me, I think I could tell myself to be more productive for 1 week and succeed at it, but I'd feel a lot more stressed or cynical about work as a result. I feel I'm a lazy person because I know I'm not doing what I could when I try my best, but I also feel well-being and health is more important in the long run. The same could be asked about upper management. They earn 10x our pay, so their output is 10x more value than our work, and they work 10x harder, right? In our normal 8-hour work day, they must work 80 hours. Except a full day is 24 hours. Why is the onus always on the bottom workers, to be honest? Why are we trying to feel guilty about our working hours versus how much we're paid? Because it's clear salary is not tied to better performers given how much upper management is compensated. Just enjoy your life. Management probably lowballed you coming into the job anyway, but if they are happy with your work, then spend that extra time you're saving to enjoying other things in life. What do you want to do, Op? The new year is coming up. I'm not upper management. Most upper management gets paid way too much for the value they bring. But, When you have the opportunity to work under an excellent CEO or CTO, you will learn that they do bring 10x or even 100x the value you bring to the team. The whole point is the compensation is not based on how hard you work but the value you provide and what the market will support. Of course, upper management works roughly the same hours as everyone else, but they also have far more responsibility. Most upper management aren't hired because they're good at something. They're hired for who they know. Knowing the personal number of CTO from a Fortune 500 company and being familiar enough to just call them is worth a ton of money for the whole company. Management experience is also a plus, but it's not necessary when you have the ability to short-track yourself, and your company, straight to the people who make the decisions. Labor is not productivity. Labor is labor, and if badly aimed, might as well be completely useless. Upper management has the power and responsibility to make decisions which can have colossal implications on the overall productivity of the company towards its goal of selling what it sells. The real issue, though, is that even though labor can approximately be measured, the impact of decisions not so much. Whatever decision is taken becomes the new normal and it's hard to know how much it was a productive or unproductive one. I'm not really knowledgeable on how upper managers are evaluated. In the last year or two, I have not worked more than 1 to 2 hours a day on average, some days for a grand total of 0 hours. The quote/unquote is not there by accident. I manage a team and some projects, and most of the time I let other people do the technical work while I get to chat with higher-ups or give some general direction on where the work should go. I consider myself very competent in my field even though I stopped doing purely technical work some time ago, but there are a lot of very good coders out there, but not enough lazy pragmatists like me. My team likes me because I don't micromanage. I support them as much as I can and can entertain them with some good jokes, career advice and a general openness that is hard to find in professional circles. I have also been able to work remotely for months, and when I say remotely I mean in very remote places. I also make top money for European standards. Some will see me as a parasite, but they would be very wrong. I do exactly what I am asked to do. I am positive and upbeat and always ready to support the team at large when needed. Others may ask, is she not getting bored? But the answer is, are you kidding me? I can spend time with my kids and partner, climb mountains, and brunch on the regular with my girlfriends. Maybe, surely. It will end at some point, but like someone said, tomorrow is not promised to anyone. I might start a coaching service at some point, as I believe most professionals, forget about the SV types, I am talking about other geographies, are far from having a real understanding on how big companies work and what should be done to have a comfortable and impactful professional life. I am a top performer, while at the same time enjoying this splendid world we are lucky to live in. Greater than I consider myself very competent in my field even though I stopped doing purely technical work some time ago, but there are a lot of very good coders out there, but not enough lazy pragmatists like me. I have found many times that junior developers really love to write code. I did too early in my career. Most of my time is spent stopping people from writing more code. As in, why are you doing this instead of using this library? Why are you even thinking about writing code to do date/time manipulation? Why are you even thinking about doing something custom when it's security related? I guess it's because modern development is actually mostly boring, so anything that looks challenging people love to think they can finally apply that algo/leet code shit they've been prepping for. In normal corp you can forget about it. It's my job to actively make sure no one is trying to be clever by writing unnecessary fun code. I've met people like you, some as employees, but most as coaches. I believe their role is somehow religious, priest-like. They are able to occupy a spot between leadership and workers to embody the ability to believe in what the company is doing. I think your role is perfectly summarized by your last sentence. Your role is to be the person who says, I'm enjoying the splendid world we are lucky to live in. I envy your ability to see the world as splendid in the context of work. I see exploitation, destruction of the environment, abusive relationships, boredom, meaninglessness. I believe most of your/our bosses feel the same way. What practical things can I do to get better at my job? I've always been a procrastinator, but since the pandemic I've become like Op. Very little work on job, whole weeks where I don't do anything. It's double-edged sword. I have rekindled some old hobbies, but I feel a lot of guilt about not being good at my job. I get by just about at work. Some people love my work, some people hate working with me. I would love to learn from successful people like you. Is there anything you can recommend reading or any course to learn? I'm in the middle of my life and feeling stuck and confused about working in tech. What's the remedy? Ever thought it might be a carrot to dangle to ICs? Look at them yo-yos? That's the way to do it. If you work hard and stay in this company, you could be able to enjoy 2-hour week work, too. No need to break away and start a startup or anything that risky. I don't think that what you're doing is very common, but it's not uncommon either. What you need to do this is to work in an environment where not being productive is not harmful. There are plenty of environments like this. For example, not doing any work but still getting paid doesn't do any harm at Google. The company is making money anyway. At a small startup that's under immense pressure, people would realize what you're doing because you'd harm the business. I'm a big believer in Price's law. The square root people produce half the value. If there are 10,000 people at the company, you can very well survive in the group of 9,900 that does the other half.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.